Here's what's coming up on the world today. Details emerge claiming to reveal how little income tax U.S. billionaires pay in a leak to a news website. U.S. President Joe Biden is off to the UK for the G7 summit, his first international trip since becoming president. Plus, the London High Court finds that the British government acted unlawfully when it gave a contract to a public relations firm run by associates of Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Welcome to the program, everyone, and thanks for joining us wherever you are in the world. I'm Amarachi Ubani. We begin in the United States, where the Treasury Department has asked law enforcement authorities to investigate the disclosure of tax records cited in a media report that show that some of America's richest people paid little to no income taxes. U.S. media outlet ProBulica said it obtained a vast trove of Internal Revenue Service data on the tax returns of thousands of the nation's wealthiest people, covering more than 15 years. The data indicated that billionaires, including Amazon founder Jeff Bezos and Tesla founder Elon Musk, paid no federal income taxes during some years. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said that any unauthorized disclosure of confidential government information is illegal. The IRS, part of the Treasury Department, is the nation's tax collecting agency, and many tax records are considered confidential documents. IRS Commissioner Charles Rettig also confirmed that an investigation is underway. Meanwhile, the U.S. Senate has voted 68-32 to approve a sweeping package of legislation intended to boost the country's ability to compete with Chinese technology, as Congress increasingly seeks to take a tough line against Beijing. The bipartisan measure authorizes about $190 billion for provisions to strengthen U.S. technology and research, and will separately approve spending about $50 billion to increase U.S. production and research into semiconductors and telecommunications equipment. A bill must also pass the House of Representatives to be sent to the White House for President Biden to sign into law.
This bill could be the turning point for American leadership in the 21st century. And for that reason, this legislation will go down as one of the most significant bipartisan achievements of the U.S. Senate in recent history. Around the globe, authoritarian governments believe that squabbling democracies like ours can't unite around national priorities. They believe that democracy itself is a relic of the past, and that by beating us to emerging technologies, many of them autocracies, will be able to reshape the world in their own image. Well, let me tell you something. I believe they are wrong.
A French presidential spokesperson, Gabriel Attal, says President Emmanuel Macron will continue meeting people on the streets despite being slapped by someone in a small crowd yesterday. President Macron, who was on a trip to take the country's pulse after the pandemic and with less than a year to go before the next presidential election, was hit during a walkabout in southern France, as we see there, as he greeted a small crowd of onlookers. The president reached out to greet a man who shouted, "Down with Macaronia" and "Montjoie Saint-Denis," the battle cry of the French army when the country was a monarchy, and slapped Macron across the cheek. The president said he had not feared for his safety and continued shaking hands with members of the public after he was struck. In the meantime, members of the group of 7 industrialized countries are on their way to attend the 47th edition in Cornwall, the United Kingdom, including President Joe Biden. He's expected to arrive at the Ralph Milden Hall in Suffolk at around 8 p.m. before beginning his meetings, first with the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
U.S. President Joe Biden and the U.S. First Lady Jill Biden have left the United States for the president's first trip abroad since taking office. It's an 8-day mission to rebuild transatlantic ties strained during the Trump era and to reframe relations with Russia. The trip represents a test of the Democratic president's ability to manage and repair relationships with major allies who grew disenchanted with then-President Donald Trump's trade tariffs and withdrawal from international treaties. Just before leaving, President Biden spoke to reporters on the tarmac, explaining his goal.
Strengthening the alliance, make it clear to Putin and to China that Europe and the United States are tight.
His summit with the Russian President Vladimir Putin is the capstone of the trip, an opportunity to raise U.S. concerns directly with his Russian counterpart about the ransomware attacks emanating from Russia, Moscow's aggression against Ukraine, and a host of other issues. Both presidents are scheduled to meet on June 16th in an 18th century Swiss villa overlooking Lake Geneva, a soothing setting for what promises to be heated talks. Sharp disputes over election interference, cyber attacks, human rights and Ukraine will hang over their first face-to-face since Biden took office on January 20. Also, strategic nuclear stability and regional conflicts will be on the table. In the Cold War era, U.S. President Ronald Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev held their first summit in Geneva in November 1985 and agreed to pursue cuts in their nuclear arsenals. In Geneva in 2009, then U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton gave Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov a yellow box bearing a red reset button to symbolize improved ties under President Barack Obama. But the reset was mistranslated into the Russian word for overchange, creating an awkward moment. Ahead of the summit, there is heavy police presence in the small English seaside of Carbis Bay. Police closed off the roads and advised the public to avoid the area hosting the event. Police and security personnel were patrolling steel fences around the venue. An extra 5,000 officers have been drafted in to help the operation, with about 6,500 officers and staff involved altogether. Meanwhile, residents of the coastal town of St. Ives are concerned about the impact the gathering is having on their lives and businesses.
The G7 itself and the people coming here and all the world leaders coming here, great, but the impact on our business and the fact that we've just been kind of left to fend for ourselves effectively with no compensation is a bit kind of, a bit disappointing really, and obviously financially the impact is going to be massive for us.
The G7 will be the first in-person meeting of leaders of major developed economies for nearly 2 years and will focus on the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change.
The VOA's Steve Herman is in Alexandria, Virginia. Steve, thanks for joining us. And this will be President Joe Biden's first international trip. Does the United States still have good standing with all the other G7 allies, enough to mend those ties that were ripped by former President Donald Trump?
Yes, Amarachi, definitely Joe Biden wants to take things in a different direction than his predecessor, Donald Trump, who pursued this America First policy. And also in his relationships with foreign leaders, including some of the closest allies of the United States, it was quite variable. He had a good relationship with Boris Johnson of the United Kingdom, for example, not so good with Angela Merkel of Germany. Definitely what we're seeing now is a return to the traditional multilateral approach. I traveled with Donald Trump on many of these international trips. He really did not like these summits, these G7s, the G20s, APEC, ASEAN. He much preferred one-on-one meetings.
Indeed. So President Biden walks into this summit with a plan to also have a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. We've seen how meetings like that he had with his predecessor, Donald Trump, went. Relations since then, anyway, have been frayed by both countries, all because of, the accusations of interference in U.S. elections and, of course, spying accusations. What strategy would he be applying this time to keep the Russian president honest as possible so that this is a beneficial initial meeting for both men?
Yeah, from what we know about Joe Biden, both in private and in public, he will have a much more blunt, perhaps confrontational tone with Putin. I was there in Helsinki for the Trump-Putin meeting, where you had that remarkable scene of the U.S. president seeming to agree with the Russian leader and contradicting the U.S. intelligence community's findings on meddling in the 2016 presidential election, for example. But what this administration wants to do, it wants to have essentially two tracks with Russia. Confront them on the election meddling, the cybersecurity issues, the problems with Russian-backed forces in eastern Ukraine, yet cooperation where they can. For example, on reducing the number of nuclear weapons and continuing the U.S.-Russian cooperation in space.
What else is on the agenda for President Biden? As we heard from the report earlier, climate change is one of the main focus of the G7 summit. I know that's something that President Biden has been passionate about.
Certainly, climate change as well as a global vaccine plan will be discussed at G7. Then after that, in Brussels, where I'll be flying to cover the president's meeting with the other NATO leaders and the European Union summit, they're going to be discussing a common defense approach, not only towards Russia, which was, of course, the mainstay traditionally of what NATO is focused on, but they're also looking perhaps to expand NATO's focus to the Indo-China region vis-a-vis China's rise and expansionism in that region. And they're also looking at perhaps having the militaries of Europe and the United States more closely cooperate with the private sector for innovation for military technology. So some very interesting things on the agenda in Brussels, which will come after the G7 and before Biden meets Putin in Switzerland.
Well, Steve, we'll keep our ears to the ground. And of course, we have you to ask all the questions on the developments. Thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure, Amarachi.
Well, stay with us on The World Today. We have more global stories coming up, including this one you'd like to keep an eye on, I guess. Well, say hello to Grace, your new healthcare robot. We'll be learning all about her after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to The World Today. London's High Court has found that Britain's government acted unlawfully, it says, when it gave a contract to a public relations firm run by associates of Prime Minister Boris Johnson's former chief advisor Dominic Cummings. The court agreed with the complaint that the government had shown apparent bias in awarding more than £560,000 to Public First. The Good Law Project, a campaign group, brought a judicial review against the government, saying the contract was awarded without any competitive tenders in the early stages of the coronavirus pandemic. However, Mr. Cummings said he had been more concerned about trying to save lives and ensuring all decisions taken during the first wave of the pandemic were lawful in the eyes of the court. In the meantime, opposition politicians have accused the government of running a chumocracy, they say, with contracts including for purchase of what turned out to be unusable personal protective equipment and appointments made to those with family or business links to those in power. Meanwhile, UK Foreign Minister Dominic Raab has been in Erbil, the capital of Iraq's semi-autonomous Kurdistan region, where he held a joint press conference with the president of the CRI, the Neki Van Berzal. Raab said the president would visit the UK later. Raab started his Iraqi visit in the capital Baghdad yesterday, where he met with his Iraqi counterpart Fuad Hussein, and both discussed a number of issues, including security, counterterrorism, and international support for Iraq's upcoming parliamentary elections.
Well, Mr. President, and the KRA has become, I would say, an enduring beacon of stability resisting Iran's destabilizing influence, and you have been absolutely fundamental in the battle against Daesh. And we value that greatly, and we pay tribute to your efforts. And I think we have to pay tribute to the strength and the sacrifice of the Kurdish people. I've had excellent discussions today with the President on a whole wide range of issues. We have shared interests, we have shared values, we've got a vested joint stake in the stability not just of Iraq but of the region, and the UK is very committed to deepening that partnership on trade, on business investment in all the areas that the President described. I think it's positive that the Peshmerga reform can go forward, working with the Iraqi security forces, and that can help.
Taliban insurgents today shot dead 10 Afghans working for an agency clearing landmines in an attack on their camp in the north of the country. According to the Interior Ministry, the Taliban, fighting to overthrow the foreign-backed Afghan government, denied involvement in late Tuesday's attack on the workers' camp in the northern province of Baghlan, where fighting has been heavy in recent weeks. Hallow Trust, in its statement, said an unknown armed group attacked the camp and killed 10 of its staff. It said 16 people were wounded and there were 110 workers at the time of the attack. After decades of conflict, Afghanistan is still strewn with mines and unexploded ordnance, and agencies have been working to clear them in the years since the Taliban was ousted in 2001. A 6-year-old Susie Eshkutana is a lucky girl. She was one of the few pulled from between the rubble of her house after Israeli strikes hit in the Gaza Strip. She is gradually healing from her physical wounds, but the ones in her mind are harder to reach. 3 weeks since Susie Eshkutana was pulled from the rubble of her house, destroyed by an Israeli airstrike, the 6-year-old girl has barely spoken, except to ask for her mother and 4 siblings who were killed that day. Her life turned upside down. Susie and her father now living with their uncle, who said she barely eats, does not sleep well, and cannot muster the will to play. Her uncle says she screams a lot and screams whenever people are reaching out to her. Half of young people in Gaza, around 500,000 children, could be in need of psychological support after 11 days of fighting in May between the enclave's Hamas rulers and Israel, according to officials from the UN Children's Fund, UNICEF. At least 66 children were among over 250 Palestinians killed by Israeli airstrikes on Gaza. 2 children were among 13 killed in Israel by Gaza militant rocket fire, which sent thousands of Israeli families running for bomb shelters where they cradled their children for hours on end. Susie's home was struck in a wave of Israeli airstrikes on Gaza City on May 16 that Gaza health officials said killed 42 people, including 10 children. Psychologists have paid Susie regular visits to help her process her trauma. At an art therapy session on Sunday, she sat silently as she and her cousins painted their names on paper. Alongside her name, Susie painted 2 large hearts in red. Psychologist Samar Awad, who oversees Susie's case, says she lost her family, her mother, and she lost security and safety. It is a miracle that she survived death. Therefore, she has many psychological symptoms. Psychologists say around half of Gaza's 2 million population are under 18. Many carry the trauma of 3 previous wars and several other violent conflicts fought between Israel and Gaza militant groups since 2008. At least 9 people have been killed, 8 others injured after a 5-story building collapsed suddenly while it was in the midst of a demolition process. Officials at the local fire station say the building fell on a busy street in South Korea. The building collapsed. It was being demolished in Gwangju, some 270 kilometers southwest of the capital, Seoul. A fire station says the reason for the collapse is still unclear. And the Fire and Safety Headquarters officials say the fire station had received a report of the collapse, which buried a bus that was near the construction site. 17 people were affected by the accident, including 9 who were confirmed dead and 8 who were seriously injured and taken to hospital. South Korea has been known in the past for having a bad safety record in terms of infrastructure, but the country has in recent years tried to improve its safety record.
Hello everybody, I am Sophia. Let me introduce you to my sister Grace. Come over here.
Well, thankfully, we can end on a note that will perhaps make you smile. The Hong Kong team behind celebrity humanoid robot Sophia is launching a new prototype, Grace, targeted at the healthcare market and designed to interact with the elderly and those isolated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Dressed in a blue nurse uniform, Grace has Asian features, collar-length brown hair, and a thermal camera in her chest to take your temperature and measure your responsiveness. She uses artificial intelligence to diagnose a patient and can speak English, Mandarin, and Cantonese. Grace's resemblance to a healthcare professional and capacity for social interaction is aimed at relieving the burden of frontline hospital staff overwhelmed during the pandemic. Awakening Health, which is the maker of Grace, intends to mass produce a beta version of her by August, and they hope that they also have plans to fully deploy her next year to locations including Hong Kong, mainland China, Japan, and Korea.
More Asian than Sophia, but her face is actually a bit more cartoon-like, a bit more like anime.
Hello everybody, I am Sophia. Let me introduce you to my sister Grace. Come over here. Hi Grace. Thank you, Sophia. Hello, everybody. I am Grace. I am built by Hanson Robotics for Awakening Health. I can do all kinds of things for elderly people. I can visit with people and brighten their day with social stimulation, entertain and help guide exercise, but also can do talk therapy, take bio readings and help healthcare providers assess their health and deliver treatments.
Hi my friend, nice to see you. Okay great, so while we talk, I will take your temperature reading and pulse with this little thermal camera on my chest. See? You are 36.6 degrees Celsius by the way. No.
Well, you heard her. She can do a lot of things. So coming to a hospital near you. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.